So this is the cabin site when I first got there last spring of 2019. This is before I was just starting to clear brush here. And I'll show you guys in this video step by step how I got from this to this right here. But what a rewarding feeling it was to build a livable home out of trees. There's pretty much next to nothing in this cabin money-wise. Everything basically came from the land. And it's pretty cool when you're sitting there when it's 40 below outside and you're nice and toasty at 85 degrees inside a log cabin that you built yourself. It's can't really describe that feeling. So here I am, all happy-go-lucky, heading to the cabin for the first time, getting ready to start clearing land. I have to hike a half mile through the woods in the summertime, about 3 miles in the winter. But in the summertime, I can get about a half mile from the cabin. And I have to hike through this because this is Superior National Forest land, and I hadn't had my permit to be able to cut a trail yet. So it was really thick brush, and everything that I hauled in came in on that green bag. Water, food, tools, any supplies that I brought in, I had to hike in there. So the first thing that I hauled in was this wood stove here. And this is early May in Minnesota. The snow had just melted, and it still got pretty chilly at night, so I knew I needed some sort of heat. So what I did is I hauled this wood stove in, and I did all my cooking and everything on that while I was building the cabin. So this was a pretty important item to get in there first thing. And as you can see, I have it ratchet strapped to a dolly there, and I carted that thing the half mile through the woods for the most part. And the reason I say for the most part is because after a while I ended up just taking it off the dolly and decided that rolling it was going to be easier because I kept having to try to roll it over all these big logs and sticks and stuff, and it was getting caught. All in all, it took me about 4 hours to get it back in there the half mile. A lot of pushing and pulling and sweating and hard work, but I got her back there, and that was a good feeling. Now there was this old existing cabin on the property when I bought it, and it's pretty run down. It was very clear that nobody had been there in a long time. I mean, you can see sticks and brush and stuff has kind of overgrown it. But it was a standing structure, so I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna move in there and stay in that while I build the cabin. And I think I ended up staying in that thing for about a month and a half, 2 months while I was building the place. Well, the first order of business was to start clearing brush, so that's what I did for a long time. Spent a lot of time clearing land around the cabin site. So I ended up building this log cabin pretty much right next to that shack, or that old cabin. And the reason I did that is because it's actually in a really nice location. There's really good drainage, it's a pretty area, and there's a few game trails nearby, so I decided this would be a good spot for it. And I did end up tearing that shack down a little later on, because it was pretty much junk, but I salvaged what I could out of it. And you can see here that every time you cut something down, it would just get tangled up because it was so thick in there that it took a lot of fighting to get a spot clear enough to build a cabin on. But that's what I did every day for a long time. Just fire up the chainsaw first thing in the morning and start cutting. So here I am digging a hole about 3 feet deep into the ground, and I dug it down to the permafrost, and the reason I did that is because that was my refrigerator during the summer. Milk, eggs, anything that needed to be kept cool I would put down in there and cover it with a piece of plywood and some moss, and that hole would stay at refrigerator temperature, and it actually worked pretty well. Well, as you can see, I got a pretty good chunk of land cleared there, enough to build a cabin anyways, so I started getting it kind of marked out, and I have this string line here, you can see kind of marking out the perimeter of the cabin, and started getting ready for it. So once I had enough land cleared, it was time to start getting logs to start building the cabin. I have quite a few white spruce stands on my property, so that's what I went with. I can't get machines back in here, so everything had to be cut, limbed, and dragged over and peeled all by hand. But I figured if Dick Prenicky could do it with a handsaw in his 50s, that I could do it with a chainsaw in my early 20s. And this is actually my second log cabin. I built a log cabin up in Alaska too before I moved back home. But I can tell you right now for sure that the hardest part of building a log cabin, I mean the most repetitive, most labor intensive, is getting your logs. I mean cutting them down, limbing them, dragging them over, and peeling them. It gets really repetitive. It's a lot of work. But it is rewarding starting to see your pile start stacking up like this. So here I am ready to start building. I got my land clear, my logs ready. It was a 12 by 16 log cabin, so my longer logs are 20 foot, and that's just to give me, 2 feet sticking out past the notches on each side, roughly. They were about 20 feet, give or take a few inches. And then 16 footers for my 12 foot logs. And again, that's just to give you some wiggle room. When you're not getting logs, from a factory, and you're just getting them right from the land like this, it's really hard to get. I mean, you're never going to get perfectly straight logs. So, you just do your best to try to pick the straightest ones, and then, it's a lot of scribing and just a lot of patience to get them to fit properly. So there we go. There's the birth of a log cabin. This is where the fun begins, when you get to start building. There's my first few logs notched together. So to notch a log, you just set it up on top like that and measure your gaps. I think, give or take, your biggest gap's probably going to be, 4 inches, 5 inches maybe. And then that's how deep you make the center of your notch on your log. There's a lot of good videos and information out there on how to do that. I think Alone in the Wilderness, Dick Proennke's documentary, he does a pretty good job of laying that out and showing you how to do that. So there's what my notches looked like. I used saddle notches. This is before I smoothed it out. What you can do is you take your chainsaw bar and go back and forth in the notch, and it ends up smoothing it out really nice, and it makes a good tight fit. So there it is. I think that was after 2 days, making good progress. And then it's just notching away. 2 notches on every log, of course, and it's just, that gets pretty repetitive too, but it's a lot more rewarding. Because every log you get done, you're a log higher. It's a good feeling. In my earlier videos, I talked about it some, but I find it really beneficial, especially if you're by yourself, to leave a few logs, the butt end sticking out past the notch you can see there, longer than the others, and that's so you can walk your log up. So you can see I'm starting to get a little higher up there now, and it's just nice that you can set one end on one of those logs sticking out, and then kind of go back and set the other one up on another one, and just kind of walk it up. That's a good way to do it if you're by yourself. Here I am with all my flooring materials. You can see I got some 2x8s there and some plywood in the back of the truck. And yeah, I carried all that through the woods. That was not a fun day. That stove and oven, that was actually harder than the wood stove because you couldn't be as rammy with that to get it back in there. So it was a little more tedious. Getting that floor done was really nice because I was to the point where it was way over my head now when I was standing on the outside. So having that floor done gave me a nice flat spot to work on from the inside, and I could actually reach the logs a little better, getting them up there. And here I am notching away on a log by myself. Pretty much just shimmied my way up there and notched. So here you can see I got my gables pretty much done. I had to cut a hole through where the door was going to be. You can see I kind of cut it at an angle, but I was just getting a hole in there just so I could get in and work. But it's kind of at an angle, so it makes the cabin look wonky. But I leveled it off later, but that was just so I could get in there. So here I am getting my ridge beam up on top of my gables. That's the longest, straightest, the heaviest log on the whole cabin. And of course it's got to go up on top. So that log was 23 feet. My eave logs and my ridge beam there were all 23 feet long, and that's so I had a 4-foot overhang out front for a porch. And there I am kind of walking up there. Really dangerous, pretty hard to do by yourself, but I made it happen. But, I just went really slow and took my time and was extremely careful. Here I am cutting in the front window. You can see I have the door already cut into the left there. And the butt ends on the front are all cut nice and even, which gives it a much cleaner look. And then I didn't have pictures of it, but once I got the ridge beam up there, I used 2x6 rafters you can see sticking out over the eaves there. And this is probably in early November. What I did is I spent the early spring, early summer getting the cabin dried in, meaning I got the rafters on and put some tar paper over it, and then I had to go back into town and work the rest of the summer, so I had some money throughout the winter. And so this right here, yeah, I think it's in early November, and you can see there's just a little bit of dusting of snow on the ground, so came back and ended up getting the windows in and everything, got it finished, sealed up for winter. And then we moved in, so you can see I'm working on the countertop here, and there's a little more snow outside now. Got it dried in and the stove installed just in time. And I really like this picture here because I'm sitting by the wood stove, nice and warm, eating a nice hot meal, and snow falling outside, and all my hard work had paid off. There's no better feeling than sitting inside a log cabin that you built, watching the snow fall by the wood stove. It's the best. So here's what the inside looks like, pretty much finished up. I hauled in that other flooring there, pulled that in on a sled, and did a few other finishing touches around there, and starting to feel like a home here. And there we are, in front of the cabin, holding Skeeter. We had quite a fun time out there this winter. I am going to make another video kind of sharing some photos of our adventures out there during the winter too, kind of similar to this one. Alright guys, that's pretty much how I ended up here at this point. You know, it's been quite the journey. I almost forgot what the place looked like, you know, before I got there. But going back and looking at these old photos was pretty fun. You can find all these videos, a lot of these pictures that were in this video, I have videos of on my channel. If you go back, you can kind of watch the whole thing unfold in video form. But yeah, anyways, I know that there's a lot of interest in this off-grid lifestyle, you know, maybe not necessarily log cabins, but just, you know, simple living, tiny house, you know, off-grid stuff is becoming more and more popular. And all I got to say is, you know, you're obviously watching these videos for a reason, and you know, you have an interest in it. Go out and make it happen. You know, anybody can do it. I'm nobody special. I don't make a bunch of money. I just went out and made it happen, and it was a dream of mine, and I just went after it. So you can do it, I promise. But anyways, thanks for watching. I'll have another video for you guys soon. Take care.